In order to understand what Global Clinical Connections does and how we're involved, I think it's first important to understand the research and development process. In other words, R&D. Let's start with the research side of things. It all begins in the lab. In research laboratories, thousands of compounds are tested in cells, tissues, and small mammals. There are usually a couple milligrams or micrograms of material tested in a high-throughput screen. This is done to identify which drugs have activity and which drugs don't have activity. From these materials, out of maybe 10,000 drugs, there may be 30 drugs which are active. From the 30 drugs, there's another round of screening with medium-sized mammals like dogs or cats where we can narrow down the drug activity. Narrowing down maybe from 30 to 5, we can look at larger animals such as monkeys, cows, pigs, which are models to mimic man's physiology, and so to see which ones are the continued actives. The reason the compounds are screened through all these layers is to avoid testing on all 10,000 compounds and avoid the cost of testing many compounds on more expensive animals. We're trying to identify the final compounds going to preclinical evaluation, another very costly process. Preclinical evaluation looks at toxicology and drug metabolism. Compounds at this stage are tested to see if they're toxic to specific organisms and to see how the drugs are metabolized in the body. These tests are regulated under Good Laboratory Practices, or GLPs. Examples of local companies which perform these kind of tests is MPI and PharmOptima. Once these compounds complete preclinical evaluation, then testing continues in humans, and we get into the process called development. While research stage tests primarily on animals, development primarily works on testing in humans. This happens in 4 phases. Prior to be able to test in humans, however, all research data is submitted to the FDA along with the protocol for phase 1 and the label for the drug product. The document is called an IND, Investigational New Drug Application. This could take up to 6 months for approval, plus answering the questions that the FDA has. Once the IND number is given, the human testing can begin 30 days after receipt of the IND. In a phase 1 study, it is the first in human, and healthy volunteers are sought for this study to make sure the compound is safe and monitor the pharmacokinetics of the drug. The patient is monitored for side effects. These studies can take 6 months to 1 year to complete. Once we complete phase 1 successfully, phase 2 begins. The first phase 2A study is called Proof of Concept Study. Patients affected by the disease are administered the compound. Phase 2A studies examine the efficacy and safety of the drug. Phase 2B studies look at dose ranging of the drug. A positive proof of concept study results is the single most important criterion in proceeding next for full development. Phase 3 is often called full development. It's a global study run for thousands of patients at multiple sites and countries. Long-term safety, efficacy of the drug, and optimal and best dosage forms are tested. Does that offer advantages over the competitor? Typically, in a phase 3 study, there is a placebo, the drug itself, and then also a gold standard or a comparator. The drug is tested to see if it'll offer equivalence or advantages over the gold standard. After phase 3 is completed, there's a submission of all the data in preclinical and phase 1 to 3 clinical data in a document called the NDA, New Drug Application. After that approval, again, it'll take some time, the drug will be able to be sold commercially by the company. There's another type of study called a phase 4 study, which looks at long-term effects. Does chronic exposure cause negative side effects? For what else can the drug be used? In the development phase, phase 1 to 4 are regulated under good manufacturing practices and good clinical practices, or GMPs and GCPs. The entire process of research and development can take up to 12 years, which makes sure a drug is safe and effective before administering it commercially to patients. We at Global Clinical Connections make sure drug supplies are provided for phase 1 to 4 clinical trials. We get the right drug to the right place at the right time. We oversee manufacturing, packaging, labeling of drug, biologic, and medical device, and oversee the GMP processes involved with the supplies. We give confidence to the site that things are done in accordance with the Code of Federal Regulation, the SOPs, and guidelines. So give us a try.